In the brutal winter of 1941, as German forces pushed deep into Soviet territory, the Red Army found itself facing a crisis that threatened its very survival. Soldiers armed with bolt-action rifles struggled against an enemy equipped with fast-firing submachine guns. The Soviet Union needed a weapon that could match German firepower, be produced in massive quantities, and turn the tide of the most devastating conflict in human history. That weapon was the ppsh-41. Simple, robust, and devastating in close combat, this submachine gun became the symbol of Soviet resistance on the Eastern Front. By the war's end, over 5 million had been manufactured, making it one of the most produced firearms in military history. This is the story of how a sheet metal weapon changed the course of World War II. When Operation Barbarossa commenced in June 1941, the Wehrmacht possessed a significant tactical advantage in infantry firepower. German troops carried the MP-40 submachine gun, which gave them superior rates of fire in the close quarters, fighting that characterized urban combat and forest warfare. Soviet infantry, by contrast, relied primarily on the Mosin-Nagant bolt-action rifle, supplemented by limited numbers of the PPD-40 submachine gun. The PPD-40 performed well, but it presented serious problems for Soviet war planners. Its construction required extensive machining, skilled labor, and time that the Soviet Union simply did not have. Each weapon took hours to produce, involving precision-cut components and careful assembly. As German armies captured industrial centers and forced the evacuation of factories eastward, the need for a simpler, faster-to-produce weapon became desperate. Soviet weapons designer Georgy Shpagin understood this challenge. Working at the Kovrov arms factory, he had studied the PPD series and recognized that traditional manufacturing methods would never meet wartime demands. His solution was radical: design a weapon that could be stamped from sheet metal rather than machined from solid steel blocks. This approach had been explored by other nations, but Shpagin refined it into something that could be produced by workers with minimal training, using basic industrial equipment. The result was submitted for testing in late 1940. By December, after trials that demonstrated both reliability and ease of manufacture, the weapon received official approval. It was designated the Pistolet Pulemiot Shpagina, Model 1941, the PPSH-41. The PPSH-41 represented a fundamental rethinking of submachine gun construction. Where other weapons of the era required milling machines and precision engineering, Shpagin's design could be assembled from stamped metal components, a simple wooden stock, and a barrel that required only basic machining. The weapon's receiver was formed from 2 pieces of sheet metal, stamped into shape and welded together. This process could be completed in a fraction of the time needed for traditional methods. The barrel, equipped with a compensator to reduce muzzle climb, was chrome-lined for durability, a feature that helped the weapon function reliably in the extreme conditions of the Eastern Front, from the frozen steppes to the muddy swamps of Ukraine. Shpagin chambered his weapon for the 7.62 by 25 mm Tokarev cartridge, the same round used in Soviet pistols. This decision simplified logistics significantly. The cartridge offered high velocity and good penetration at close range, making it effective against enemy soldiers, though it struggled against body armor or hard cover. Perhaps the most distinctive feature was the drum magazine. Holding 71 rounds, it gave Soviet soldiers sustained firepower in combat. A 35-round curved box magazine was also available, offering a lighter alternative for situations where mobility mattered more than ammunition capacity. The drum, however, became iconic, its circular profile immediately recognizable in photographs and newsreels from the war. The weapon fired from an open bolt using blowback operation, keeping the design mechanically simple. It could be switched between full automatic and semi-automatic fire, though most soldiers kept it on full auto during combat. The rate of fire reached approximately 900 rounds per minute, slightly higher than the German MP-40, which fired around 500 rounds per minute. Weight was a consideration. At roughly 8 pounds loaded with the drum magazine, the ppsh-41 was heavier than some contemporaries. But this weight helped control recoil during sustained fire, and Soviet infantry were accustomed to carrying substantial loads. The genius of the ppsh-41 extended beyond its battlefield performance to its manufacturability. Soviet factories could produce the weapon using equipment originally intended for other purposes. Automobile plants, tractor factories, and even facilities that had manufactured civilian goods were converted to arms production. Workers who had never touched a firearm before could be trained to assemble ppsh-41s in days rather than months. A single ppsh-41 required approximately 7.3 hours of labor to complete, compared to nearly 14 hours for the earlier PPD-40. The difference seems small, but multiplied across millions of weapons. It represented an enormous savings in both time and skilled labor, resources the Soviet Union could not afford to waste. The weapon contained only 87 parts, and many of these were identical or interchangeable, further simplifying production and maintenance. Soldiers could often repair damaged weapons using parts salvaged from others, an invaluable capability when supply lines were stretched or cut by German advances. As Soviet industry reorganized behind the Ural Mountains, production accelerated. By 1942, factories were producing tens of thousands of ppsh-41s monthly. By 1943, that number had grown to hundreds of thousands. The Soviet philosophy was clear: quantity had a quality all its own. If German soldiers had superior training and tactics, Soviet forces would overwhelm them with firepower. This mass production also reflected Soviet strategic thinking. The ppsh-41 was never meant to be a precision instrument. It was designed for close-range fighting, for clearing trenches, for urban warfare, where battles were decided at distances of 50 meters or less. In these environments, the ability to deliver high volumes of fire mattered more than accuracy at range. The ppsh-41 entered widespread service during the winter of 1941 to 1942, arriving just as the Soviet counter-offensive began pushing German forces back from Moscow. For Soviet infantry, who had faced enemy submachine guns with only bolt-action rifles, the new weapon transformed combat dynamics. In urban fighting, the ppsh-41 proved particularly effective. During the Battle of Stalingrad, Soviet soldiers used the weapon to clear buildings room by room, floor by floor. The high rate of fire and large magazine capacity gave defenders the ability to suppress German assault teams while they maneuvered. In the rubble-strewn streets where engagements occurred at point-blank range, the ppsh-41's firepower was decisive. Soviet reconnaissance units and assault groups received priority for the weapon. These formations, tasked with penetrating enemy lines and conducting raids, needed portable firepower. The ppsh-41 became their signature weapon. Tank crews also carried it as a personal defense weapon, appreciating its compact size and effectiveness if they had to abandon their vehicles. German forces quickly recognized the weapon's effectiveness. Captured ppsh-41s were highly prized, and Wehrmacht soldiers often preferred them to their own MP-40. The Germans went so far as to manufacture conversion kits, allowing the ppsh-41 to accept 9mm ammunition, the standard German submachine gun cartridge. Thousands of captured weapons were officially adopted by German units, designated the MP-41R. By 1943, entire Soviet rifle divisions were equipped with the weapon. Frontline units might have one ppsh-41 for every 2 or 3 soldiers, a ratio that gave Soviet infantry unprecedented firepower in offensive operations. During major offensives like Operation Bagration in 1944, waves of Soviet infantry advancing with ppsh-41s could deliver such volumes of fire that German defenders struggled to respond effectively. The weapon also served in less conventional roles. Partisan units operating behind German lines received ppsh-41s through airdrops or captured them from Soviet supply depots. The weapon's durability and simple maintenance made it ideal for guerrilla warfare, where access to repair facilities was non-existent. One documented account from the Battle of Kursk in 1943 describes a Soviet infantry company defending a village against a German armored assault. Armed primarily with ppsh-41s, the soldiers engaged German infantry supporting the tanks, forcing them to withdraw and leaving the armor vulnerable to anti-tank weapons. The sustained fire from multiple submachine guns created a psychological effect as much as a physical one, making German soldiers reluctant to advance into the storm of bullets. When the war ended in May 1945, the ppsh-41 had become one of the most recognizable symbols of Soviet military power. Over 5 million had been manufactured, and the weapon had served on every front where Soviet forces fought, from the Arctic Circle to the Caucasus Mountains. But its influence extended far beyond World War II. The ppsh-41 established principles that would shape submachine gun design for decades. Its use of stamped metal construction demonstrated that effective weapons could be produced quickly and cheaply without sacrificing reliability. This lesson was not lost on post-war designers. The weapon remained in Soviet service through the early Cold War, and enormous stockpiles were distributed to Allied nations and communist movements worldwide. During the Korean War, Chinese and North Korean forces carried ppsh-41s against United Nations troops. In Vietnam, the weapon appeared in the hands of Viet Cong guerrillas. Revolutionary movements in Africa, Asia, and Latin America received Soviet military aid that included ppsh-41s. The weapon also influenced Soviet firearms development. The later PPS-43, designed during the war as an even simpler alternative, took the stamped metal concept further. The post-war AK-47 assault rifle, perhaps the most influential firearm ever created, incorporated manufacturing techniques pioneered with the ppsh-41. Mikhail Kalashnikov himself acknowledged studying the weapon's construction methods when designing his rifle. Western nations also learned from the ppsh-41's example. The realization that sheet metal weapons could be produced rapidly and cheaply influenced post-war submachine gun designs across NATO countries. The simplification of manufacturing processes became a priority, particularly for nations rebuilding their militaries after the war. Today, the ppsh-41 remains in limited service in some regions, a testament to its robust construction. More commonly, it appears in museums and private collections, a reminder of the desperate years when the survival of the Soviet Union hung in the balance. The weapon's cultural impact persists as well. In Russian memory, the ppsh-41 symbolizes the Great Patriotic War, representing the industrial might and sacrifice that defeated Nazi Germany. It appears in war memorials, films, and literature as an icon of Soviet resistance. The ppsh-41 was more than a weapon. It was a solution to an existential crisis, a product of necessity that demonstrated how industrial innovation could alter the course of history. In the hands of Soviet soldiers, it helped turn the tide on the Eastern Front, providing the firepower needed to stop and then reverse the German invasion. Simple, effective, and produced in staggering numbers, the ppsh-41 embodied the Soviet approach to warfare. overwhelming the enemy through mass and determination. Its influence on firearms design continues to resonate, a lasting legacy from one of history's darkest chapters. Thank you for watching. If you found this exploration of World War II firearms history compelling, please consider subscribing to the channel for more in-depth documentaries on the weapons and technology that shaped our world. What topic would you like us to cover next? Leave your suggestions in the comments below. Whether it's another iconic weapon, a forgotten battle, or the untold stories of the people who lived through these events, we want to hear from you. Until next time, thank you for joining us on this journey through history.